wouldn't be years, but he would, and he totally support the conferences and especially the topics of these conferences. And the Assessore De Martini sent our letters, and we will appreciate this effort, and he's totally sustained this initiative with all the tools possible for the municipality. Then now we are ready. Kai, you have done it. Okay, cool. And I would like to introduce Pia Budal, Head of the Communication and Future Build, working with climate-friendly architecture and urban development in the Oslo region. Pia is a qualified art historian from the University of Oslo, specializing in architecture and urbanism. Then Pia, the title of her presentation is The Power of a Good Example, Pilot Projects as a Driver of Change. Pia, okay, just give you the remote control.
I'll just, yeah.
Please.
Okay, thank you for your introduction. Now, I'll start with showing you a photograph of my colleagues. We are 6 people working in Future Built, 3 architects, 1 landscape architect, 1 biologist, and me, an art historian specialized in architecture and city planning. We all love cycling, as you can see, and ever since I was little, I've been cycling a lot. I used to ride my bike to school, and when I started to work and had a kid myself, I didn't have a choice. Driving a car, going by metro, or walking was simply too time-consuming. So I cycled. But the funny thing is that when I started working in Future Built in 2012, I'd never been on a cycling holiday. It hadn't even crossed my mind. But having 5 enthusiastic biking holiday colleagues changed that. Whenever we went on an excursion, either abroad or in Norway, my colleagues and I always combined it with 2 or 3 days of cycling. And I loved it from the first trip. What a fantastic feeling of freedom, cycling through beautiful landscapes and going to towns I'd only dreamt of. Arriving Chablis in France on a bike, can you imagine anything better? Well, of course, apart from arriving at an Italian vineyard on a bike, of course. And this is actually 5 years today. I got it on my Facebook memory. So 5 years ago, we were cycling in France. And this story leads to the title of my talk, The Power of a Good Example. In Future Built, we believe there is great power in a good example. We believe in sharing experiences. And we believe that the pilot projects are important drivers of change. So let me tell you a bit about how we work and what we have achieved. To support climate-friendly urban development, 6 municipalities in the Oslo region are collaborating on the Future Built program. In addition, there are 7 partners, both private and public. Our vision is to show that climate-neutral urban areas based on high-quality architecture are possible. And since the start of Future Built in 2010, pilot projects have been used as a strategy for changing the way buildings and urban areas are developed, believing that good examples are important for making a change. Our goal is to complete 100 pilot projects that cut carbon emissions by at least 50% compared to current regulations and common practice. This is measured by a greenhouse gas accounting tool. and the reductions must be within the fields of transport, energy, and materials. Each pilot needs to fulfill certain criteria. In addition to transport, energy, and materials, the projects need to work with topics such as circularity, water management, biodiversity, and of course, social sustainability. Building sustainably is not only about measuring greenhouse gas emissions, it's also about making attractive and livable neighborhoods and engaging residents and users in the development process. By September 2021, Future Built includes 69 pilot projects, both public and commercial, dealing with neighborhoods, housing, schools, kindergartens, office buildings, cultural centers, and cycling projects. Our main target group are the developers, but finding new solutions, first of all, depends on a project group who is willing to go that extra mile, looking for what is new. All future-built pilot projects must have innovative showcase qualities, and for each project, we discuss what new solutions can be explored and where there is a potential for breaking new ground. We aim high, but not so high that the goals are out of reach. So what is the future-built recipe? The process with the pilot projects follow more or less the same path. The first step is to establish contact between Future Built and the developer, and the municipality also takes part in this dialogue. Then we start discussing the ambitions for the pilot projects. If the project is ambitious enough, the developer applies to join Future Built. A committee led by the municipality decides if the project can join, and agreement is signed between the developer, the municipality, and Future Built. And the building application is given high priority by the municipality. Throughout the project period, Future Built serves the developer and the construction team with workshops to help the projects achieve their ambitious environmental targets. The developer uses a greenhouse gas accounting tool and estimates the carbon footprint for the pilot project. This is done for a reference building, the building as designed, as built, and in use. And last but not least, communication is central throughout the project period, not only on our website, but also through seminars and visits to the pilot projects. So what have we achieved this far? Future Built really is a one-to-one architecture exhibition. So let me show you some of our pilot projects. Back in 2010, when Future Built was established, we only had a handful of passive houses in Norway. But technology is rapidly advancing, especially with regards to energy efficiency and local renewable power. While passive houses were innovative only a few years ago, plus energy houses like the kindergarten on this photograph has been an important step on the route to zero emissions. It's not one big technology or one big innovation that is changing the game, but several solutions working alongside one another, like using integrated solar panels as the roofing material at this kindergarten. And next, please. Or the golden solar panel facade on the wall on this brand new school in Oslo. As the sun is lower in Norway than in Italy, using facade-integrated solar panels is a good solution. The developer is the city of Oslo, and we often see that public procurement plays an important role in influencing the market and driving innovation. However, to succeed in reducing the construction sector's climate footprint, we need to shift the industry from linear use and production towards a more sustainable production based on recycling and reuse. Circular buildings are now a reality, and Norway's largest full-scale circular project is Christian Augusts gate number 13 in Oslo. And we are moving there in November, so I'm quite excited. Here, the developer Entra has refurbished and added an infill volume to an 8-story building from the 1950s. 80% of all the material in the project is reused, which has led to a reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions by 70%. Even the concrete slabs and supporting structures in the building are sourced from buildings undergoing demolition. And it goes without saying that reuse of these structures represents major challenges for the architects, the engineers, and building contractors. Making old building parts fit together, while also meeting today's building technology requirements, demands innovation and entirely new ways of building. There has been little expertise in the Norwegian market about reuse in such large projects. For used building materials that lack documentation, it was necessary to prepare new procedures to meet current requirements and standards. The focus of keeping, recycling, and upcycling has been present in all stages of this project. The interior designers have used leftover tiles from other projects in all bathrooms, so they all have their own unique look. But circular principles are important in more future-built pilot projects, and the Port of Oslo is now refurbishing their own offices using circular principles. The building was erected in 1915 and was the first building in Norway to use reinforced concrete. As the building is worthy of preservation, improved energy efficiency and indoor climate must be combined with preserving and restoring the lost original architectural expression. The windows have therefore been replaced in accordance with today's energy standards, as well as according to antiquarian principles of aesthetic appearance and detail. The project also includes insulating and restoring the facade with 40mm super insulating lime mortar with aerogel, particularly suitable for rehabilitation of historical buildings. In 2016, aerogel was tested for the first time in Norway on a tiny housing project in Oslo, also a future-built pilot project. And talking about materials, we need to talk about the use of low-carbon concrete in a couple of future-built pilot projects. We know that concrete is a harmful material climate-wise, yet the modern building industry needs concrete. Our strategy is therefore to avoid concrete when we can and minimize the amount of concrete whenever we have to use it. And we must choose the best concrete product available for the given task. By adding fly ash or scoria to the concrete mix, it is possible to reduce the CO2 emissions with around 70% compared to conventional concrete. And this concrete is what we call low-carbon concrete extreme. That may sound impressive, but we must bear in mind that in the greater picture, this is just a stepping stone on the way to carbon-neutral concrete. One of the first projects to test low-carbon concrete extreme is the Climate House in Oslo, which was built to raise awareness about climate changes among youngsters. It was completed last year. In the Climate House, the use of concrete is limited to a very thin base done in one single cast. To minimize the amount of materials, the concrete base is exposed as floor in the interior throughout the wooden building. As the building sits in the middle of a botanical garden, we were anxious to cut any tree roots. The external columns therefore rest on concrete pillars that are carefully dug out in between the delicate root systems of the trees. This allowed us to build very close to the trees. In short, the Climate House shows the way to the building solutions of the future. The building is designed to get an optimal effect of the PV panels on the roof. There is a wooden structure, natural ventilation, focus on biodiversity, and stormwater management, and the building site was also fossil-free. This is the new Munch Museum, opening in October, and also planned in accordance with the future-built criteria. The museum is at the forefront in terms of both energy savings and reduced climate gas emissions. And to reduce climate gas emissions, Munch has been built using low-carbon concrete. The museum is based on the idea of a tower-shaped museum where the main functions are organized vertically. 60 meters in height, clad in recycled perforated aluminium of varying degrees of translucency, and with its leaning top section, the tower is a highly visible landmark from all sides. And so is the National Museum, which is also a future-built pilot project, opening, as we heard, in June 2022. The basic idea for the new National Museum is to use the available resources carefully. One back, I think. Yeah. The museum is built using robust materials that can withstand the test of time with dignity and clad with natural stone. The museum is planned according to environmental goals in 4 key categories: greenhouse gas emissions, energy, material choice, and technical building solutions. Next, please. Passive solutions will reduce energy use, and a heat pump with seawater as the heat source is installed and will be used for cooling when possible. The peak heating requirements of the building is covered by district heating. This is the new public library in Oslo, which opened in June last year. And it's one of my absolute favorite projects. Despite of COVID-19, this library has managed to become a vibrant hub. Stretching over 6 floors and 13,500 square meters, you will not only find 450,000 books, but also loads of other activities. You can visit the children's section with all its playful hiding places, watch movies with your friends, make podcasts, learn to play the piano, sew a dress, use the 3D printers, or simply enjoy the view of the Oslo fjord. Combining translucent walls with glass windows, the building's facade creates a light and airy dynamic inside. The exposed concrete ceilings with its striking honeycomb pattern draws the eye up through the central atrium. The new library is planned according to future-built criteria of at least 50% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and the calculations show a combined reduction of emissions of 69.8%. With other words, the library is a brilliant combination of social sustainability and climate-friendly architecture. And so is the student housing at Kringsjå in Oslo. With its 11 stories, the student housing block, completed spring 2018, was Oslo's tallest building made of cross-laminated timber, with a goal of near zero energy level. Cross-laminated timber, solar panels, and local geothermal heating characterize the new family housing blocks that were completed last year, as well as water storm management and biodiversity. One consequence of wooden buildings is better indoor environment, as the exposed cross-laminated timber elements help to regulate humidity and temperature. During the last years, we've seen several wooden future-built projects, and I also want to show you the first commercial housing project in cross-laminated timber. The developer of this project is ambitious, both when it comes to low-carbon strategies and social sustainability. As in most big cities, buying a flat in Oslo is very expensive. And to help people who cannot easily buy a flat on their own, the developer has arranged for smart flat layouts where parts of the flat is privately owned and parts is shared space. 2, 3, or 4 people can share the flat, and there are flexible solutions when it comes to bathroom, for instance. You can either have your own or you can share with others. To get more space, all shared flats come with a wall bed, which can be transformed to a desk during daytime. In addition, you also have access to shared facilities, like the roof terrace and a sauna. And if you don't have enough room in your flat for an overnight guest or a party, there is a solution for that as well. The flats have been put out for sale now, and the project is due to be completed in 2023. And I'm really quite excited about this. I'm looking forward to see how it's going to work. This far I haven't talked much about transport, but the topic is very important in the future built pilot projects. It's also perhaps the most difficult topic. There is hardly anything that makes people more upset than when you tell them they cannot drive their car. But we do it anyway. All future-built pilot projects are to be located close to public transport, and the amount of parking spaces should be reduced by at least half, and car-sharing services should be provided. Facilities for pedestrians and cyclists must be of high quality. This is a new cycling hotel opening in Oslo this autumn at the metro station. And at this kindergarten, the municipality invited employees and parents to develop a pilot to make more people walk, cycle, or use public transport. Those that agreed to park their car at home, going to kindergarten and going to work, were rewarded with subsidized to buy electric bikes, winter bike tires, or season cards for public transport. It is, of course, always interesting to see what comes out of projects like that, but we do know that this project has made at least some people think differently about transport. So what is the lesson learned from Future Built? Testing out new ways of building and constructing through pilot projects is an inspiring way of driving change. The pilot projects get a lot of attention, and we see a ripple effect where experiences from pilot projects have an impact on other projects. The pioneers are eager to contribute to the change to the low-carbon society, but the attention they get from media, politicians, and professionals is, of course, also motivating. Many developers have chosen to do several future-built pilot projects because they see it as a useful process to improve their business, to attract highly qualified employees, and to build an image as a responsible and forward-thinking company. We don't say it's easy to be a pilot project, but it is not necessarily difficult either. Through Future Built, the developers are challenged to think differently, and with a little support from the best practitioners, all the Future Built pilots have given a contribution to the development of a low-carbon construction business. It does have some costs to be a front runner, but it's a myth that sustainable buildings are much more expensive than regular buildings. Most of the extra costs comes from the process of planning and design, so it's crucial to put an extra effort in this phase of the project. However, the building phase isn't necessarily more expensive, and that is where you find the main costs. So to conclude, pilot projects are drivers of change. It is fun, inspiring, and you can learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia, for this very interesting lecturing about the pilot projects and what your program is doing actually in Oslo. Thank you so much. We will discuss later in the debate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Maria Chiara Tosi, PhD in urbanism, is actually full professor in urban design at the University of Iuav, where she is also the coordinator of the PhD in urbanism. She is currently leading of the Interreg project crew on the wetland management, partnering the Horizon 2020 City 2030, concerning the forest system, and in the direct project DIVA on creative industries. The title of the lecture will be Sustainable Welfare Space. Thank you, Maria Chiara. Please.
What should I do? Yeah, okay. So thank you so much. And let me start with a very big thank to the Embassy of Norway for this very kind invitation. It's really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here and share with all of you my reflection. My speech today regards the role of welfare space in the design of a more sustainable city. And Norway, of course, has been a very important reference in my studies on welfare policies. But what I try to do today is to give an answer to a question. So which is the relationship between welfare policies and the city, and the special aspect of the city? Okay. So I want to start with quoting Edward Soja, a geographer, an American geographer, that in its book, The City and Special Justice, posed a question: why special and why now? And he argued that whatever your interest may be, it can be significantly advanced by adapting a critical spatial perspective. And he recognized a significant change in the thinking about space, from emphasizing the flat cartographic notion of space as a container or a stage of human activity, to an active force shaping human life. So this is a very important change in the way we think at space. And he also pointed out some 15 years ago that this special turn as the primary reason for the attention that started being given to the concept of special justice and to the broader specialization of the basic idea of democracy and human rights. So it's a shift between social justice and special justice, putting a more effort in working on the spatial level. And it's under this special turn that me, together with my colleague Stefano Munarin, we started looking at the physical dimension of welfare policies. And so we started speaking of welfare space and not only welfare state. So my speech today tried to deal with the relationship between welfare policies and the city. The way in which a complex set of action designed to ensure greater well-being and welfare to different populations influence the building of the city, depositing facility and spaces, and conversely, how the city and its spatial articulation could contribute to the well-being of its inhabitants to a more sustainable environment. So recognizing also the erosion that the term welfare and welfare state has undergone in recent decades, a process of emptying of meaning that made it almost unpresentable. It's difficult today in our societies to still use the word welfare and welfare state. Perhaps in Norway it's a little bit different, but in the Mediterranean countries, well, welfare policies has almost been disappeared. So the assumption is that trying to establish a new connection of meaning, this term, welfare, could be still a useful operative concept. Useful because it's capable of illumining the settling phenomena by reflecting mainly on collective well-being rather than the individual well-being. By paying attention to public spaces more than private building. Next, please. So the object of my reflection concerned welfare spaces that were constructed during the 20th and the 21st century in Europe as a space for collective life activities. And for me to work on this broader perspective of Europe is very relevant for at least 3 different reasons. Firstly, because the widespread presence of public facilities like schools, hospitals, parks, sport fields, and so on, even if not always correctly located or built, in my view, constitute one of the key characteristics of the contemporary European city. One of the main factors of identity of European city compared to other cities in the world. Second reason, it's because welfare space is one of the areas in which citizens can determine their very identity and form a spirit of citizenship. And it's even more important today as Europe is attempting to welcome and accommodate the many immigrants who arrive in our country, obtaining not only home and employment, but also new rights that come with citizenship. And this is a couple of Chinese that is wedding, and they decided to celebrate the wedding day in a public park in our cities. And thirdly, to investigate welfare space means to work out the themes of sustainability through the construction of urban spaces that are livable, comfortable, healthy, and safe, of course. Next. So, to me, to study welfare space leads to deal with the difficulty of living in many parts of our cities, in the periphery, the peripheral part of our cities, constructed after World War II, deals with the hostility that many parts of the city have in relation to their inhabitants, especially the young, the elderly, the physically impaired. So the misery of urban space, as well of the landscape, their resistance to the normal unfolding of our daily life, so in the normality of our life, has gradually weakened the right to the city, the right to live in a comfortable, healthy, safe, and sustainable city, establishing an important link between special misery and injustice. And to me, it's not a problem of great misery, but of a radical material poverty, but the misery of position, as Pierre Bourdieu like to say, that is the set of difficulties and frustration that one clashes with daily while using the city. So it's a small misery, but sprawled. So that the injustice of spaces we live in grows ever greater. And anyway, the definition of spatial injustice comprise different aspects in our cities. Injustice in mobility, with the prevalence, also the monopoly of the car, capable of establishing generational gaps as well as economic ones. The risk of living in an unsafe city, where the effects of climate crisis call people's very lives into question, and the pulverization of criticalities with the territorial and social system of family networks that seems to absorb difficulties like inequality, poverty, crisis, and risk, but actually distributes and hides them, all the criticalities, inside the home. So, for instance, a children's daycare or a nursery that is too far from home, and then in the daily life it provokes a lot of effort to overcome also this distance, or the absence of a nearby park. So when you, at the end of the classes, it's difficult to bring a child into a park. Next. Or the discontinuity of a sidewalk or a bicycle path. Well, these are just a couple of examples, but there are a lot of many other aspects that may be considered the main aspect that provokes that makes for laborious living in our territory. And all these things have led us to reflect on the urban infrastructure, on what does not create individual wealth directly, but contributed to the collective well-being. Next. So such kind of difficulties in our region, in the Veneto region, for instance, but in many other parts of the European countries, have led an increasing number of people to find individual solution to the issue, to search for comfort, for a more sustainable space inside their own home, and abandoning urban space. And the transfer towards suburban areas, what we call in Italy città diffusa, a diffused city, dispersed city, also leads to the theme of the search for individual comfort. Next. And in the Veneto region, like in this picture, we tried to study the sprawl of settlement from the hypothesis that the phenomena of sprawl have concerned not only residential and industrial fabrics, but also the production of collective spaces, equipment, facilities of what we call welfare spaces. Over time, these policies of infrastructure, the investment in social and cultural capital, as Pierre Bourdieu said, gave rise to a plurality of spatial organization. Next. So, specifically in Italy, we have a specific law, the Planning Standard Law, a decree adopted in 1968, that leads to the creation of a lasting asset on public lands to provide public services and facilities of the highest quality, improving the everyday life of people, and also, of course, emancipating them from the spatial misery and poverty. So this decree, it's a very simple decree, established 18 square meters of public spaces that should be available to every inhabitant. And this 18 square meters was to be split into 4.0 square meters for schools, 2 square meters for shared facilities, 2 square meters for parking, and 9 square meters for parks, for green areas, sport fields. So since 1968, when this decree was adopted, each Italian municipality with more than 10,000 inhabitants has been obliged to identify areas for the above purposes in order to create a reserve of public land and to include the areas in the municipality master plan. Next. So in an area such as the Veneto region with such a sprawl situation, next. The decree led to the production. Each dot that you can see, it's a nucleo of schools, sports fields, and so on. So we have now a reserve, a very large reserve, and sprawled all around the territory of such kind of public spaces. Next. And also, if we look at a specific municipality, this is a municipality of 10,000 inhabitants, we have a lot of schools, primary, secondary schools, sport fields, library, and so on. So we have a large reserve of public spaces that can contribute to improve the quality of life of people. Next. So if we look at the schools, for instance, this kind of facility is totally sprawled all around the region. Or, next, if we look at the industrial area, this is a map that represents all the very small industrial areas of the Veneto region. We started looking into each area, next, And we recognize that also inside this monofunctional area, you can find a lot of collective facilities, like nurseries, for instance. Next. So, close to the workspace, you can find next space like this, no? So like nurseries, but many other facilities, like parks, kindergartens, collective eating areas, gyms, and so on. But next, we also notice that natural spaces are becoming space for social interaction. And thanks to spontaneous practice of collective use, a new network of planning standard is growing. So riverbanks are becoming path, cycle path, or next, disused quarries become a flood retention basin and phytoremediation areas, but also public parks at the same time, so multifunctional devices that play different roles. Or again, agrarian roads that are used for several activities. Well, all these collective activities took advantage of existing natural spaces, making them accessible through pedestrian and cycle paths. And these facilities, new and old, find their foundation in a new cultural attitude that interprets the territory at the same time as an ecological good and a natural capital, and a collective place, a space that keeps together ecological and environmental functions with the collective uses. Spaces produced by the public, but which are nourished by collective uses. They are top-down products, but nourished by bottom-up processes. Next. So, observing this space, this very large network of welfare spaces, we can think that it's also from here that we can start a conscious public policy interested in reducing forms of economic, social, ecological, and special injustice. And we asked ourselves how welfare spaces built as a planning standard, thanks to the decree I mentioned before, during more than half a century, may be considered today as a starting point for a greater transformation of the Veneto region. And this is the scenario proposed, what we call Veneto Welfare Space 2030, equipped and accessible, is really a simple and apparently banal idea that each inhabitant should be able to reach on foot by bicycle in a reasonable time, 15 minutes, primary and secondary schools, playgrounds, parks, health centers, elderly centers, sporting areas, libraries, and so on. And all this may be done safely and in comfortable conditions. So a very basic idea that try to keep together, to link together all the planning standard areas, this very large reserve in a new network. It's quite clear that the issue to consider involve not so much the increase in facilities as their accessibility, considered here as an instrument through which to ensure the right to have rights to education, to health, to leisure. Furthermore, we started thinking that open spaces, parks, gardens, and public area for sport and leisure resulting from the planning standard decree are recognized as basic assets to be leveraged in deciding on new tools capable of serving new ecological and social need. And in such way, the incorporation of these issues into the design of the city and into policy-driving design requires improvements of standard land assets in terms of soil minimum performances, in percolation of water to ensure urban security by minimizing surface runoff, or excess of water, and through, for instance, urban forestry intervention, the reduction of atmospheric pollution and prevention of heat islands. So the idea was to use this larger reserve of planning standards of welfare spaces as the starting point for a new reflection on sustainable spaces. And I just want to quickly present a couple of projects, maybe pilot projects, as already said, that have a new performance. And so the first one, I'm going to the conclusion. Next. So the first one, no, this one, okay, is the case of an agricultural land surrounding a small municipality that has been a forest to facilitate the retention and hosting of phytoremediation basin to protect the settlement from flooding. And the idea of this forest has its roots in the early 80s when a large new forests were identified in the master plan. And of these areas, a part was defined as territorial green woodland, a planning standard soil managed by the municipality. So it's a public space, a public soil. Thanks in such way to the standard planning decree and the related publicness of soil, such urban forest has been set up as a multifunctional device capable of performing several ecosystem services, such as capturing and retaining carbon, collecting and purifying water, absorbing pollutants, and enhancing biodiversity. The second case, the second project, is in a small municipality close to Padua, where a regional law on hydraulic invariance, which are required to maintain or improve the hydrological performance of the soil, led in 2004 to a change in the master plan of the city, replacing a high-density new residential area with a new standard soil, so a new public space. On this public land, guaranteed by the same decree, the planning standard decree, a park of 2 hectares has been planned, containing a rain garden, so a system of lamination tank, as you can see here, that in fact is a public park where children can play and spend their free time. So in conclusion, I believe that incorporating the issue that I try to describe into urban projects requires a new policy of soil standard to ensure their minimum performance. It may seem trivial, but we are talking about minimum rights, for example, of living in cities that are resilient with respect to events of extreme weather. These are strongly claimed rights, but today they are not guaranteed at all for various reasons, and primarily due to the lack of attention to the quality and potentiality of the soil and their continuous erosion. So securing the minimum rights require a pervasive and meticulous work on the lands, an extensive, what we call in Italian, progetto di suolo, the project of the ground, the project of the soil, that should affect all inhabited territories. This is not a worthless plan. On the contrary, it reminds us that along with the plan of large infrastructure, large intervention, we must recognize the importance of a large plan of small intervention, sprawled all around the city and the territory, a pervasive plan of incremental changes that begins with standard soil to guarantee the dignity of the space that welcomes us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara, for this brilliant lectures on welfare space and its possible development in the future. Then, next, I will have the pleasure to invite Maria Molden. Maria Molden has 4 years of experience as a city architect in Bergen, a role she had to define as and carefully implement in society, being the first of its kind in Norway. Her main focus as a city architect is to show how architecture can be a key tool for achieving the municipality's social goals and strengthening the services the city provides. Thank you, Maria. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to talk about how we work with sustainable architecture in the city of Bergen. It is a great honor to stay here in Venice. Italy has been a source for inspiration of architecture in so many years, and it's a great honor to stay here as an architect and a bureaucrat together with other dedicated architects, and to realize how important every role is in the production of our society. I really believe in the power of architecture to make the change we need. And in my job as a city architect, I'm allowed to set clear demands for architecture and what we expect of each new project in order to raise the bar for sustainable architecture. We, in the City Architect of Bergen, has developed a tool. I brought one with me here. We have developed a tool to connect architecture to our goal for our city. With distinct use of architecture, we believe that both beauty, local character, and sense of belonging has the power to inspire people to live a sustainable life, reuse buildings, share spaces, cooperate, and develop the city. I will now explain how we work to both set expectations and inspire solutions that makes a difference through our architectural strategy. Before. One back. We named this strategy Architecture Plus to emphasize our focus on the added value of architecture. We see the power of architecture as a tool for reaching our main sustainable goal, a tool that asks for architecture to contribute to a beautiful, characteristic, accessible, and green city. And I will talk more about that, but I have to say something about Bergen next. Bergen is Norway's second largest city, located at the west coast of Norway, and also is the capital of the fjords that our minister talked about. It's perfectly placed to have been busy trade harbor throughout history, strongly connected to the rest of the world because of its natural harbor. Next, please. It's surrounded by sea and mountains, and nature is always within reach and has a big impact on the development and atmosphere of the city. Next. The traditional construction material is wood, like you see here from the dense historic harbor at Bryggen, a part of the UNESCO Heritage List due to the Hanseatic town planning principles. As a mean, next, to prevent fires in the wooden houses, we have many wide and open spaces that gives important spaces for people to meet. And I will now take you a bit closer to the impact this beautiful urban structure may have had on its inhabitants. Next. The people of Bergen have a strong sense of belonging. They care about and are engaged in the development of the city. They like to live here and use their surroundings to meet, to talk, to quarrel, and to develop the city. This feeling of pride and inspiration we want to emphasize when we continue to develop the sustainable city of Bergen. Next. Because using the power of beauty and inclusivity may be the best way of reaching our urgent need for a greener future. Next. Our main task is therefore not only to reduce the use of resources, but in a greater extent mobilize resources in people through the way we build. Next. Architecture has always been used as a tool to shape society, to protect from harm and to inspire behaviors. From castle with moats and beautiful churches to modern city structure and bomb shelters. So how do we build now to secure ourselves for the future? It may no longer be the immediate threat that becomes the most important thing, but how we live our lives in the long term. And I think that one of the most important tools to influence our life is how the physical framework inspires this lifestyle. Therefore, architecture has a bigger task than just wrapping up our lives with more environmentally friendly solutions. The architecture can help making it easier to live sustainable, healthy, and good lives. Our way of living and finding meaning connected to the surroundings is the core of achieving holistic, sustainable development empowered by people. For architecture, it is not that we are building, but how. It's the awareness of making people, it's the awareness of making places for people that are important. Next. Like we see in this wonderful picture from Copenhagen. Next. Architecture is an expression of the value of society. That's obvious when we build an opera or a new town hall. But it's also an expression of our values when we build homes, bike lines, traffic lines, streets and squares, nursing homes and schools. Every single project has the opportunity that architecture gives us to contribute to social and environmentally sustainability. For these two girls, are the surroundings important for their memories, for their awareness of light, the season and the opportunity to move and play freely? It gives spaces to develop as humans. Therefore, architecture is not a question of style, but a precise tool for change. This is the base for our architecture strategy. Next. We in the City Architect of Bergen used to say that architecture may contribute to sustainability in 3 different aspects. First of all, of course, when it comes to construction, energy use, and CO2 emissions. But also when it comes to how we design our public and private places, like we heard earlier today, that enable multiple use and changeable use of the constructions. And the third, but even more important, is the way we build nice and interesting and inspiring places that makes it easy to live a sustainable life. Next. I know it comes a series of small sentences, so I say next many times. I now want to share an excellent example of a space that represents all three aspects. It's a versatile and inspiring common space made to inspire all kinds of people for all kinds of use. It's called a blue stone made of Asbjørn Andresen. Next. It's a space of previous urban art shaped by knowledge of human behavior. It's just big enough to contain. Next. Small enough to be contained. Next. Central enough to attract. Open enough to be filled. Next. Low enough to invite. Heavy. Next. Heavy enough to carry a burden. Next. Light enough to float. And the last one. And playful enough to become a friend. This, for us, is about precise solutions and architecture that does something that we want to. It's just a desire of the effect in each building we try to achieve through precise architecture. And this is the way architecture can contribute to sustainable development. Next. Our strategy is based on this. This is the background for developing our strategy, and I will now go through it. Next. It's based on architecture as a tool. Next. Each building and urban space should give new qualities to the city and contribute to an attractive and distinct city that gives a sense of pride and belonging to its inhabitants, and an inclusive and green city that provides quality of life and sustainability. Next. Strongly connected to these goals, we have formulated 8 topics where architecture can make a difference, each linked to a principle of how this can be achieved through design. It gives no fixed solution, but are asking for the effect of architecture. And it represents the range of discussion we want to have in every project. I will now take you through the 8 principles. Next. To achieve attractivity, all new architecture shall contribute to comprehensive design. Next. It means that architecture must be based on holistic ideas or concepts that solves multiple issues and create added value to the place. Next. Also, to achieve attractivity, all new architecture shall contribute to aesthetic experience. Next. And the architecture should aim to create spaces that stimulates, inspires, and enrich our sensory and spatial experience. Next. To create the second goal, distinct character, all new architecture should make an interaction between city and nature. Next, the architecture should strengthen the link between buildings and the landscape and integrate vegetation and water to create quality. Next. To develop distinct character, we are asking for urban environment with unique character. Next, the architecture should enhance the site's unique qualities and cultural heritage and create places with distinct identity. Next. To achieve inclusiveness, we ask for architecture that activates the public realms and contributes to city life on the ground floor. Next. The architecture should encourage active use of streets and urban spaces and increase quality of the pedestrian experience. Next. And even more important for building the inclusive city is that all kind of new architecture should contribute to social, sustainable neighborhoods. Design should encourage people to meet and be able to be active in their community. Next. We are especially asking for schools to provide multiple use of spaces over the whole day and year. Even public services as elderly houses and kindergartens are asked to be designed for being the heart of the local community. Next. To contribute to low energy and resource use, we ask for innovative and comprehensive energy and climate solution that also provides high architectural and environmental qualities. Next. And we ask for more use of wood because it's both local, sustainable, and gives us nice indoor conditions. Next. For making the sustainable architecture, we ask for solutions that contribute to the adaptable city. Buildings should be able to adapt to changing climate and society. Next. And we are asking for architecture that gives flexibility and the possibility of multiple use over time, like here where it's a combination of street and schoolyard. Next. The strategy is concrete and understandable, and it's representing a good platform for discussions. We have experienced that the focus on the positive impact and added value of architecture engages stakeholders to be more aware of their role and responsibility towards society. Every day we meet and try to find what kind of architecture gives the best solution we are looking for. And we are experiencing the need of more facts and science, and we need more conversation about the greater impact architecture has in the people of their lives. It may seem obvious for you as architects listening to us today, but it's not always like this. So we need a stronger focus on the impact of architecture. And I think I have to end this lecture to ask for more facts. We need more good examples where people can experience changes, like Future Built we're talking about. And we need more understanding and more science to really hit the nail for the sustainable architecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for these passionate interventions about the city transformations of Bergen. Next, we will have Margherita Vanore, architect and PhD, full professor in architecture and urban design at the Università di Venezia. She teaches for the degrees courses in architecture and the SIBA School of Specialization in Architecture and Landscape Heritage. She conducts research on the project for the contemporary city, the landscape, and the historical cultural heritage. Her title of the lectures will be Taking Care of People and Places as Venice Urban Architecture is Able to Do.
Thank you, Matteo. May I use
Of course.
directly?
Thank you so much.
Then you can I try to presentation, no problem. Mi aiuti solo a vedere dove sono. Allora, questa, qui tutte le schede. Come vado in visualizza? CTRL e avanti con vista, modalità schermo intera, con le freccine. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to have this occasion to exchange some point of view about sustainability. And I like to consider this succession of relation something that can establish a very interesting exchange between our different culture. I would like to talk about the care of people by sharing space, sharing spaces before and post-pandemic. I think that we have something to understand about our last obsession in the healthy question, in the healthy issues. In this picture, you can look at an image of imperfect health, how our city is possible to be the subject of our health, the place of our health. We know that our health is concerning the culture, the community, the human-made environment. But health and well-being, nature and built environment, human behavior are all aspects that are connected. So the determinants of health and well-being is part of the construction of our cities. And the settlement of health is something more important for sustainability. What makes a great place? What makes great cities that can accept the change and the challenges of our next time, our future? For urban well-being, we have to balance between quantity, possibility, and quality of public space. We have to create opportunities for play and personal expression in a simple space configuration. We have to create porous borders, visual depths, transparency, permeability, and vitality of the ground floors towards the shared open spaces. Variation and articulation, quality and comfort, choice of alternative paths and transport means. So the healing space is something that is articulated, multifunctional, inclusive, accessible, connective, ecosystemic, adequate, adaptive, integrated, identifiable, attractive, and eco-sustainable. So we try to look at Venice as a model. Venice is the construction, is the architecture, is the urban architecture. The quality of life cannot be only reduced only to the psychophysical well-being of certain individuals, but is anchored to a value system and must be conceived as a dynamic balance between individual, society, and environment. In this sense, the design of the city and its shared space is measured by an increasingly conscious demand for the potential to integrate the different physical, phenomenal, ecological, and environmental dimension with a quality that is synthesized in the form and the structure of the city. So city spaces can be several things, at once and adapt their nature and conformation to a flexibility that requires overcoming the two-dimensionality of a borderline or demarcation between what is public and what is private. A specific interest for the well-being is in those places recognized as shared urban spaces. The today experience meaningful contamination, vibrant streets, urban rooms, and inhabited thresholds. Alive places that provide different speeds in an articulation that fits multiple possibilities and urban attractivities. So Venice is the subject of our attention. Venice is part of a landscape city, is a part of the lagoon, but it is also the place where we can look at the sociality in a sustainable way. It is a water city, a spectacular water city, where everything is built as part of the island. The soil and the architecture is built in one moment. There is no place that is not architecture in this city. We have many monumental places, but we have also the necessity to understand how this beauty, this great beauty, is part of a complexity that can teach us what we have to do for the future. So looking at Venice during the lockdown months, we can appreciate also the many potentialities of this city, but also the possibilities that this city can express in the variability of the relation between the city built and the landscape. So Venice, the historical center of Venice, may be a model for many other parts of the city itself, the mainland cities, but also the model for other contexts, other places outside the same soils of Venice. However, the campi, the fondamenta, the sociability of this place, the capability of this city to accept the variation in architecture as in the relation with the landscape, the urban landscape, to accept the change of times and also its durability, the use of materials that have to be part of a connection with these water soils. And we can look at gardens beyond a wall. We can look at place to use in different way, but walkability is part of this beauty city. And this heritage is something that is still changing. It is a vital heritage that can express also the condition to rehabit this place in the border of the city. This is a city with different problematic, different aspects that has to be regulated. The high waters but also the connection in the place. But it is a porous city where the fabric can accept everything. Also, the connection with a little doll in a monumental position as a little state. So we are working in this university, studying Venice, but connecting with the international context, using a different approach to sustainability. In this way, I would like to remember this book, Venice is a City, by Franco Mancuso. And in this description of the city as an architecture, the vision of the different islands that can create the city seems to be the suggestion for something new in the design of the city itself. We can accept the formation of the transformation of Venice as something that can create other models for the future of the mainland city. So looking at the different aspects of islands, working paths, and canals network, we have to understand the complexity of this city is part of its construction, of its architecture. And in this picture, you can look at the walls that construct the city of Venice, but also the relation with the water, the capacity to use the wells for the collecting of water is important. So our research was collected in these two books, part of a series of books inside research that was for a project PRIN, and it was the city as a care and the care of the city. And in this case, we look at the connection between the healthy status of the city about the non-communicable disease in the relation with the performance of the city itself, but also with the urban forms. In this connection, we established a comparison between the city, the historical center of Venice, and the garden city, the center of Marghera. These two parts of the city of Venice are part of the same lagoon city, detached by the lagoon, but these are part of a geometric area that are in the 3 kilometers of radius. And they are extended and delimited by some borders, some edges that are very different for the quality of relation between water and the spatial city. You can look at this part as the rehabilitation of Venice was making parts of the city in the mainland. So there is a relation of requalification between Venice and Marghera. And the garden city constructed inside at the edge of the lagoon at the background of Porto Marghera was established as a healthy city, but without the stratification and the capacity of relation with its landscape. So our research was about the landscape city, trying to connect the workability also of the different centers, and the connection with the very important networks of channels and water, the historical delimitation of forts and the lagoon, but also with green infrastructure that are able to connect with Venice. So this great city, the water city and the mainland, maybe also suggest us this kind of spaces, vital streets, urban oases, inhabited threshold, and we can find these three particular shared spaces in the core of the city. Making the comparison, we can also establish where to work for the project. Venice has a great architecture of Venice Historical Center as a great architecture of the borders. The borders are a place of sharing, are a place of sport activities, a place living and vitals, where we can find many different spaces. They are not bordered by the edge. So looking at this model, we can understand many things about the possibility to create an urban architecture for the future living. I am showing you very fast these pictures, but I think that the important is also to understand how the variability of the urban space of Venice is possible to be a model. This is a temporary bridge built on the ships and for some occasion, but the use of the water surface is very important. And so the relation between Venice and its territory, the lagoon city, and this is part of a strategic proposal for Marghera, looking at the model of Venice, creating new islands in the border, creating new parks and a new network that can be the connection between the lagoon and the Riviera del Brenta. So I would like to close with this image. The city still needs shared space of multifunctional, open, accessible, informal or formal place that accommodate different activities and ecosystem services. It needs an environmental infrastructure more complex that is rooted in the ground and interacts intensively with both the element of nature and the built environment together with the urban living practices. To improve the quality of the environment to promote healthy lifestyles, the urban project has the duty to reestablish an integral vision of cities with their landscape, recompose architecture, open space, mobility system, productive space, and green-blue infrastructure in a sustainable balance and living environment. So, turning back to Venice, we think that identified, detached, and opposed by the same lagoon, two parts of the world's most famous city built on the water, are compared in order to recognize in their very otherness characteristics and values that are crucial to the project for the care of a landscape city. Between the physical and visual permeability of the margins, between green spaces and place for sharing new connections, quality, the new connections quality, qualifying the context for a sustainable living. And inhabiting the landscape city implies a new way of experiencing the city, above all a new way of preserving it and designing it, of organizing and shaping space according to adaptive morphologies, of taking care of it in the integration now unavoidable, of the many factors that determine human and environmental well-being. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Margherita, for your vision and projection of Venice, some peculiar images and your point of view. Then we have 10-15 minutes of break,
Yes,
I think.
We
You have a coffee break right now?
minutes for a coffee break, and then we are here at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, 12 o'clock. Okay, perfect.
okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
much.
Thank you.